exact same dream that Nebuchadnezzar had a night or two before. And in that dream, they saw a statue. What was the head made of?
Gold.
And what did the head of gold represent? Okay. Then just as silver is inferior to gold, so another kingdom was going to arise that was inferior to Babylon, which was? What's that? Medo-Persia. That's it. And the next one, the thighs of brass represented what was? Greece. Then the legs of iron. Yep, legs of iron, Rome. And the feet of iron and clay.
Europe.
Yeah, divided Europe. And a stone was cast out without hands, which represented who?
Jesus.
Where did it hit the statue?
In the face.
That's why I think this is not quite right. I would have had it hit in the toes of the feet, not the ankle. Anyway, I didn't draw the picture. That's the best I could find. And that stone represented Jesus Christ, which was an everlasting kingdom that would take over the whole world. And of course, we know that Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Babylon back in 500 BC, roughly. And after Nebuchadnezzar, Darius the Great, he was the Mede. And apparently, from what I can see in those days, the Medes and the Persians worked together to conquer Babylon, and the Medes were the dominant one in that relationship. But over a period of time, the Medes drifted away and vanished, and the Persians probably took over, if you like. Next was Alexander the Great, the Greek warrior, and then Imperial Rome, and of course Papal Rome, and went on from there. But many of you who grew up in the Adventist church here, interesting to see. Oh, okay. You folk had an advantage. You probably heard these things when you were growing up. I guess the disadvantage is that you become complacent and you just sort of don't sort of think about it. Maybe I don't know. But I didn't grow up with this type of stuff. I grew up in a secular home, and this was my religious experience. These two paintings, and they terrified me. I'll tell you how I got them, or how. My mum and dad. Well, I've got to say, Dad, his parents were divorced when he was 3. How they ever got married, I will never know. His father was a sailor, always out to sea. His mother was a cook in the shearers' quarters, always out west in New South Wales. I don't even know how they met, but they didn't last. They were chalk and cheese, and they were divorced when he was 3. He was the only one child, and they both felt they couldn't look after him and put him into Catholic institutions, where he's remained till he was 17. So for 14 years, even though none of them were Catholics, he was raised in Catholic institutions. And when they first got married, Mum and Dad, they were in their early 20s. Mum was 20, Dad was 22 or something. And they lived in temporary accommodation, something like this. And only about 2 kilometres from Central Station in Sydney they were. It was accommodation built in the Second World War. And they lived there in a one-room apartment. Mum told me this story, and I've never shared it. I hesitate to share it. Even in sitting there, I'm thinking, I'll wipe it out, I won't share it. But I will share it, take it as whatever value you think. When Mum and Dad were first married, neither of them were religious, although Dad had this Catholic upbringing. And this little one-bedroom sort of place, Mum and Dad's bed, and my cot was at the end. I was just a few weeks old, maybe a month or 2 old. And Mum had a vision. It wasn't a dream, she told me it was a vision. And Dad was asleep in the middle of the night, and she said, this is what happened. Jesus appeared to her in that little hut. And Jesus went across and picked up this baby, which was me, and looked at Mum and said, I'm taking him. Mum pleaded, and Jesus said, well, look after him. Put me back into the cot. And Mum told me that story many times until she died. The outcome was that the next day, Dad went out and bought these 2 paintings. He the best he could do. And he put them above my bed, where they stayed till I was 15. Even we moved house, the painting went above my bed. I hated these paintings. I was terrified of them. Big black timber frames around them. They were ugly paintings. The people weren't very happy. I didn't know about Jesus. This guy cuts in his hand. That's weird, I thought. Their hearts, look at their hearts, their clothes, their colour. Everything was horrible. And one thing that really, really, really I hated about them was wherever I was in my bedroom, I was the age that was still fell off the back. I'd be sitting there playing with cars, and the eyes would stare at you. They painted the paintings that those eyes followed you everywhere in the room. I was terrified of them. And when I was 15, I finally talked Dad into getting rid of them. So that was my religious upbringing. The second thing that really had an impact upon me when I was a kid was this book, The Brereton Story. My grandfather, Dad's father, came from Crystal Brook. Anyone know Crystal Brook? About 200 km north of Adelaide. It's a small town. My grandfather was one of 18 kids. he migrated to Sydney on the ships, I guess, and lived there. And they had a Brereton family reunion, and there was a lot of Breretons went to this. This is back when I was just a little tacker, maybe 6 or 8 or something. And when they went to Crystal Brook for this family reunion, they discussed about writing this book, stories about past. So they got a book out in '83 at another reunion. And my dad and mum come back. I didn't go to this reunion, any of them. When mum and dad came back from the first reunion when I was a little tacker, they come back with all the stories of our ancestors. And I was just absolutely amazed. And one story that they come back with was this guy called Sir William Brereton. We grew up in a really poor home in housing commission all my life, Western Sydney. And so they had this night, I've seen Disney TV shows, and these guys wore armour, had the red cross on here, and had the long jousting stick, and did all types of exciting stuff. I was absolutely fascinated with this guy. And I read as much as I could about him. He even had a castle. Well, it was called Brereton Hall, but I sort of called it Castle. And apparently he was a friend of Henry VIII. And a friend in the way that he fought in a war with Ireland that England was fighting, and he outdid himself somehow. And Henry VIII gave him hundreds of acres up near Cheshire, and he built this Brereton Hall up there. And when the internet came out, I was able to trace this and find it. I researched it. I tell you what, I know more about this Brereton Hall than just anything else. And Michael I even went there, and we've been to the Brereton Hall in Cheshire. And so I was just absolutely fascinated with this guy. Now, this is back in 500 years ago. The 1500s, about early 1500s. Remember, at this time, the Catholic Church was dominant in Europe. I mean, the Pope had life and death over just about anybody and everybody. And you can look, I picked out one or two stories to show for you. You read about this in Great Controversy 57 and 58. Maybe you've heard this story. The German Emperor Henry IV had offended the Pope. And the Pope summons him to come to the Pope's castle, where he went, and he stood 3 days. The Pope made him stand 3 days in the snow, barefooted, before he would see him, before he could give absolution. And I didn't know what absolution was, but it's, according to the dictionary, it's freedom of sin and guilt. So the Pope would give him freedom from this guilt. So the Pope had absolute control over Europe. In fact, the Great Controversy says, the noon of the papacy was the midnight of the world. We call it the Dark Ages. Why do we call it the Dark Ages?
There was no light. There was
There's
no Bible.
No, the Bible was in Latin, and the Mass was in Latin. The common people had no. In fact, you weren't allowed to have the Bible. And you can read stories of. I read one particular story of a family that had 3 little kids, and they somehow got a portion of the Scripture in their own language, and they trained their kids to learn and memorise. About this age, about 7 they were, 6 or 7, to memorise the Lord's Prayer in their own language. And when they were caught, the father and mother both burned at the stake, and the kids were put into Catholic institutions so they could be raised correctly. So the noonday of the papacy was the midnight of the world. Remember when, just in March this year, when Francis died, 252 cardinals got together to elect a new pope. One of them was interviewed on the news. I'll never forget what he said. The reporter asked him, what type of pope do you think we'll get? One like Francis, soft and gentle, or maybe one more traditional, a bit of a hard liner. And this cardinal said, a number of us are talking about it, it's a consensus. We want a pope, quoting him, that will take us back to the light. Isn't that interesting? They want to go back to the noonday, that's what he said, want back to the light. Not back to the dark ages, they call it back to the light. This is Martin Luther. Of course, he's called the father of the Reformation. He wasn't the first reformer, there was many before him. Can you name some? Jerome, those two. There was Wycliffe. There's quite a number of them actually. Tyndall, yes. I think another one too. Anyway, there's quite a number. But he's called the father because he's the one that I guess he's maybe outspoken more, I don't know. But he wrote those 95 theses and nailed them to the door of the Wittenberg Church. Notice the date, and remember the date, 1531. That document was written, what language was written in? Latin. interesting that not long after he nailed it there, it was only days, I understand, maybe even a week, it was translated into German, and this new invention, the printing press, mass produced and sent all over the place. Now you can read these, find these 95 theses in English, of course, on the internet. I've gone through some of them, and I picked 4 out to share with you today. This is what some of the things that Martin Luther nailed to that door at Wittenberg back in 1531. It says, the Pope, number 21, the Pope cannot remit or remove guilt. He can only declare what God has already given. Number 2, the selling of indulgences makes people think forgiveness can be bought. And that's true, isn't it? You know, indulgences where you buy something, and indulgences were a big thing to St. Peter's Church. Has anyone been to St. Peter's Church, Basilica? Okay, yeah, we have too. It's the biggest church in the world. When you walk in there, that was built by indulgences. So people would buy these indulgences, forgiveness of sin, and you could even buy an indulgence 5 years in advance. So you pay for it now, a large sum of money, and the next 5 years the sins are forgiven in advance. So you can go out and rape, rob and steal. You're already it's not a bad deal if you think of it that way. Number 32. Those who believe in indulgences, this is what Martin Luther said, those who believe in indulgences give them certainty of salvation will be eternally damned. Now I picked out this 186 because it deals with the Basilica. Why does the Pope, who's richer than many kings, not build St. Peter's Basilica on his own money instead of poor people's money? They're pretty good points, eh? Well, this was happening in Germany. Well, this was happening in Germany. In England, Henry VIII was married to Catherine of Aragon. She was the daughter of the King and Queen of Spain, staunch Catholics. And Catherine Aragon, she was a staunch Catholic too. They were married for 24 years, and from what I can understand, they had a very good relationship. Except he had one major problem. What was it? He wanted a son. He was desperate for a son. He wanted his dynasty to go on forever. And she couldn't give him a son. So after 24 years, his love for his dynasty was greater than his love for his wife. And this is where William Brereton comes into the scene. William Brereton, like I say, he was a close confidant of Henry VIII, but he married Henry VIII's second cousin, Lady Elizabeth Savage, which brought him even closer. And Henry VIII saw Anne Boleyn, a young lady-in-waiting in his court, and was attracted to her. Maybe she can give me a son. And I think he learned to love her over the next 3 years. And William the Brereton was given 2 special jobs. One, take her secretly some crown jewels, and number 2, visit all the lords of England to sign a petition asking the Pope that his marriage to Catherine of Aragon could be annulled. So he got that petition, they sent it to the Pope, and what happened? The Pope said, no way, Jose, you stay married. And what was Henry's response? I would imagine he exploded into a fit of anger. He was used to getting his own way. He said, well, you can stick your Catholic Church, I'll start my own church. Where we don't want to have a Pope, but the head of the monarchy will be the head of the church. And he ended up marrying Anne Boleyn on 1533. Notice the date. This is only 2 years after Martin Luther. And the reason I'm sharing this is because the Catholic Church is losing power in Europe, slow but sure. And after a while, after 3 years, she didn't produce a son. She had 2 miscarriages. Henry VIII was absolutely livid. He desperately wanted a son so much. He was like Nebuchadnezzar, wasn't he? Nebuchadnezzar, he didn't want the gold, he didn't want the whole statue of gold, Daniel chapter 3. And he was the same. He wanted a kingdom that would last forever. And this was his main ambition, his main focus in life. It wasn't his wife. It wasn't love with her, although he did seem to love these 2 women. But he had this ambition to have an heir. And of course, when she didn't produce a son, she was executed. And look, how she was executed was interesting because the Prime Minister of England at the time was a guy called Thomas. I just lost his name now. Oh, who was here? No, that's Thomas. Cromwell was the Prime Minister. Although they didn't call them Prime Ministers back in the 1500s, it was the Chief Minister. And him and Brereton, the Prime Minister and this guy, they didn't agree with policy, and he was very outspoken against the Prime Minister. So the Prime Minister came up with a plan that would give his family wealth and also get rid of the pests. He named 5 men to Henry that had affairs with Anne Boleyn. One was Brereton, one was Anne Boleyn's brother George Boleyn. There was a guy called Norris, Weston, and Stephen, I think the 5 guys were. And these 5 guys were executed. In fact, they were executed on this spot here. Anne Boleyn was executed in the Tower of London, which is on the right hand side here, because she was royalty. But if you weren't royalty, you were executed outside the tower. So these 5 guys were executed out here. So as I learned all this stuff growing up, I'm thinking, there's things happening in this world, and there's religious things behind all this all happening. And when I became an Adventist and started to read more, I discovered that Daniel, about 2,000 years, almost to the year that this was happening in Europe, he had a vision where he saw these things happening. Daniel's now about close to 80 years of age. We don't know exactly how, but it's about 78, 80. And in Daniel chapter 7 and verse 1, it says this: in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed. And he wrote the dream and told us some of the matters. Who's Belshazzar?
Nebuchadnezzar's grandson.
Yeah, Nebuchadnezzar's grandson. The Bible calls him Nebuchadnezzar's son, but everyone was a son. If you were a descendant, you were a son. So he's Nebuchadnezzar's grandson. And in his first year, Daniel had a dream on his bed. And he says here, and Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, behold, the 4 winds of the heaven stroke upon the great sea, and 4 great beasts come up out of the sea. The verse one from the other. And in Bible prophecy, which you read in Daniel and the book of Revelation, there are many symbols there. And one of those symbols is winds, another one there is the sea, another one is beasts. And look, we haven't got time to go through all those symbols. If you want to know what those symbols are, I've got a Bible study on it, and email me, I'll send it to you. In the Bible study, it's got a list of the symbol, what it means, and the Bible references. So if you want that Bible study, just email me. So, the winds in Bible prophecy talk about strife and warfare. The sea, I'll put this one, I'm actually down here, the sea, Revelation 17:15 says, and he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest where the horse sitteth are peoples, languages, nations, and tongues. So what does sea represent?
People.
Yeah, people. So Daniel saw that the winds of strife going on this populated part of Europe. Where Daniel lived was around the Mediterranean. So this is where the focus of these visions are. So Daniel saw around the Mediterranean there was nations fighting and angry and that type of thing. And out of this turmoil, 4 great beasts come up out of the sea, diverse or different one from another. Daniel 7:4 says, the first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and I was lifted up from the earth, and made to stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given unto him. And of course, what's the first metal in the statue of Daniel 2? Gold. Well, this is the very same. This is the line represents Babylon. In Jeremiah, I picked some verses out of Jeremiah because Jeremiah, he was a prophet in Jerusalem at the time, before Nebuchadnezzar sieged Jerusalem. And there's some verses there which talk about like Babylon is the lion of the lion. And the lion is a fitting symbol of Babylon for sure. And has anybody seen this before? Has anybody been there in Berlin? I haven't been there, but this is the Ishtar Gate. And in 1902, a German archaeologist called Robert Koldewey, he was on a dig in Babylon, ancient Babylon, the ancient city of the ruins. And you come across this gate. It's 5 stories high. It took him 12 years to uncover it and to label it and to label every brick. It was transported to Berlin where it was rebuilt, if you like. But it's covered in lines. This is the main gate to Babylon. So the lion is a fitting symbol on Babylon. In fact, here I put down Daniel 2. You have the symbols over here, the head of gold, etc. The meaning, Babylon, Medo, Persia, Greece. Daniel 7, here's the symbol, the lion, the bear, the leopard, the beast, and exactly what they mean, and the text to go with it. So Babylon is the lion. The second beast, it says here in number 5, it says, and behold, another beast, a second, like to a bear, and it raised itself up on one side, and had 3 ribs in its mouth, of it between its teeth of it, and they said thus unto it, arise, devour much flesh. So who is this beast? Why is it raised up on one side? It's stronger. Darius to raise it stronger. Why has it got 3 ribs in its mouth? I didn't know either, so I looked it up and researched it. I'm reading this book at the moment, Daniel and Revelation by Urias. Urias was one about 5 years ago. I believe he was a General Conference president at one stage, but he was also a contemporary of John and James White. And he also was the editor of the Review and Herald for over 50 years. And he says, it's Daniel Revelation, I'm just reading it at the moment again. He says on page 109, the 3 ribs doubtlessly signify the 3 provinces of Babylon, Lydia, and Egypt, which were especially oppressed by Medo-Persia. So these provinces were the Medes and the Persians, there was Babylon, Lydia, and over there Egypt, controlled and dominated. And I beheld another like a leopard, which had upon its back of it 4 wings like a fowl, and the beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given unto it. This, of course, is Greece. The leopard is a fitting symbol for Alexander the Great, who was the Greek guy who conquered the world, if you like, because the leopard is a swift beast. How long did it take Alexander the Great to conquer the world? 12 years, which is absolutely phenomenal. And right, in fact, they've made it the leopard, but he also put 4 wings on it. In Bible prophecy, wing is a symbol of speed. So this guy conquered the world. And he died at 32. So he started conquering the world. He started his conquest at 20 years of age. And when he was 20 to 32, he had nothing else to do. Do you know how he died?
Was it drinking the Herculean cup?
Twice he did it in a row. The guy died. Unbelievable. He had no heir. So his kingdom was divided into 4. The 4 heads represent the 4 generals. And you can see here, I don't know how to pronounce these very well, but it looks like Lysimachus. He took that purple part. Cassandra took the part on the other side. Seleucus took this big part, the eastern part, and Ptolemy took Egypt. Then Daniel sees this 4th beast. This beast, there's no animal on earth that Daniel can liken this beast to. And Daniel says in verse 7, and I saw in the night vision, behold, the 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake into pieces, and it trampled the residue with its feet of it, and it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it. It had 10 horns. And as I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. Thus he said, the 4th beast shall be the 4th kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it and break down and tread it down and break it in pieces. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom, 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall arise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and shall subdue 3 kings. And in verse 25 says, and he shall speak great words against the Most High, he shall wear out the saints of the Most High, think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hands for a time at times and dividing time. The question is, who is the little horn? This is the question. When you look at the comparison between Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, and you get down to the legs of iron, which is Rome, and the fourth beast, which is Rome. We have the divided Europe. This beast, this little horn, comes at the end of time. That's stone that hit the statue, hit it in the feet. Who is this little horn? God hasn't left us to doubt. He's given us 10 identifying marks of this little horn is. And this is the first one. He arose out of the fourth beast. So this kingdom, this little horn, like this power, come up out of that fourth beast. It had great iron teeth. That gives us a bit of a hint. The iron, if you like, as the leg of iron. The second point is it come up amongst the 10 horns. So there's 10 horns of 10 kingdoms, and Europe was divided into 10 kingdoms. Once the Rome fell, if you like, the Roman Empire fell, pagan Rome, there was 10 different kingdoms were divided into. So this little horn came up amongst these 10 kingdoms, if you like. So it has to be something from there. The next point is it came up after the 10 horns. So it has to come up after those 10 kingdoms. It was different from the other horns. Why was it different? How was this power different? Those other 9 kingdoms are political entities, if you like. Whereas this Roman power, it would be not only political, but would also be religious. The 2 points. He had looked more stout than his fellows. And some of the other versions, just quickly, New Living Translation says, seemed greater than the others. And New King James says, greater than his fellows. This little horn started off very small amongst the 10. But it grew and grew and grew until it was such a power, it outshadowed the other 9. More stout than his fellows. He uprooted 3 kingdoms. The kingdoms of the Vandals, the Heruli, and the Ostrogoths, they were Arian kingdoms, and they had different religious views, or different theology, if you like, than the Roman Catholic Church. And those 3 were wiped out completely. Uprooted 3 kingdoms. Spoke great words against the Most High. Speaking arrogantly and blaspheming against God, boasting against God, claiming divine authority, and rejecting and mocking God's law. War at the saints of the Most High. Look, I've picked out 3 stories here that really had an impact upon me. One was John Huss. Someone mentioned John Huss before. One was John Huss. John Huss was a Catholic priest who lived on about 100 years before Martin Luther. And he was outspoken. He was a Catholic priest. He was outspoken and he tried to reform the Catholic Church. And 3 of his main issues with the Catholic Church were the reading of the Bible in the common language. You know, like I said, to have a portion of the Bible in your own language was a death sentence, and many people were executed because of that. All Christians should receive the communion. Back at this time, it was only the priests who had the wine. Everyone had the bread, but only the priests had the wine. And look, I don't know, but they had the alcoholic wine in the Catholic Church. And look, I remember years ago, as a literature evangelist knocking on doors selling my books up in Lismore. There was a family, a Catholic family. They were lovely, genuine people. And their only son was killed in a car accident. And the Catholic priest told them that their son was in purgatory. And had to pay quite a large portion of their wage each week to this Catholic priest to get their son out of purgatory. They told me this week they'd saved up and they got an arm out of purgatory. And I was grateful. I confronted the priest. I went around to see him. And I'll never forget him. He was an old guy. He had the biggest breath. He was an alcoholic. He was using this family as a milking cow to support his habit. And I was absolutely livid, old guy. And so maybe, I don't know why they didn't have the wine in the old days. Maybe the priests were all of the alcoholic wine himself. That's what I'm thinking. And he was opposed to indulgences too. Indulgences, like I said, the Basilica was built with indulgences. You know, up until just recently, you could get the indulgence by following the current Pope on Twitter. But when the Catholic Church saw that, they changed it. There's still links there, but they changed it. John Huss was very mistaken this one here. We went to Europe once, and anyone know Pastor Harold Harker? Harold Harker, he was a union president in Australia here, and he, when he retired, he took a number of, he used to take trips every year to Europe to all these spots. And he always wanted Michael and I to go, but we could never afford it, about $10 or $12 each or something, one of these trips, which was all that didn't get in with it. And one time, when we retired, we had enough money to go, and he gave us all these notes. He had mountains of notes, I mean, encyclopedias and stuff, with GPS coordinates for all these spots. And this was one spot I particularly wanted to see. It's in a place called Constance, and it was on the border of Germany and Switzerland. Back in the day, it was Germany, but today it's in Switzerland. The border's changed since Huss died. So this spot where he died, when we pulled up there in our car, in this cul-de-sac, a roundabout, if you like, around this cul-de-sac ends around this, it runs around this rock in the middle. There was a father there with his 10-year-old daughter, I guess, and they were looking at this, and we pulled up and they took off. And down the road, only 2 k's away, was this church here, the Catholic Church in Constance. When we went to this church, it must have been a special event because there was queues miles long everywhere to get in. You remember, Mike? I don't know if we got in the queues and went in. I think we did. I was looking inside. And here was John Huss, burned at the stake at this spot here because of his faith. Another story that impacted me greatly. Again, I got the coordinates from Pastor Harker and told me about this. This is in northern Italy. And when I heard the story, I just had to visit the spot, and we did. This is way up north, very north of Italy. I can't remember the town now. This was a building that was built in 1683, I think it was. And it's been cement rendered, but there's this part here, so you can find the little, this is the only marker to this story, 1683. A Waldensian pastor refused to give in to he followed his conscience and his beliefs and was executed because he wouldn't go with the Catholic beliefs, if you like. And in this wall, they said, recant or we'll kill you. He wouldn't recant. He was buried alive. They were building this. He was built inside these brick walls. And these spots were very moving spots when I visited these spots. I'll never forget that these guys would rather die than give in to their faith, than give in to their conscience. In fact, you can read about some of these stories in Fox's Book of Martyrs. John Fox was appreciated author, or no, history man. He says over 50 million Christians were martyred between 538 and 1798. 50 million. That's 110 a day. For 1,260 years, people were executed because of their faith. And it says in there, wear out the saints of the Most High. This power will wear out the saints of the Most High. The third story that really impacted me was about St. Bartholomew's Massacre. Has anybody heard about it? Okay. It happened in August 24, 1572 in France. And the Queen at the time was, she was the Queen Regent. I can't say her name very good. Catherine de Medici or something? Medici? Yeah, thank you. Her son, King Charles IX, was the King of France, but she was the boss. She wore the pants, if you like. She was a staunch Catholic. Living in France at the time were Huguenots, who were Calvinists, from John Calvin from Switzerland. And there was over a million Huguenots living in France. And these were Protestants. She was a staunch Catholic, and she hated them. And when one of the head of the Huguenots was getting married in Paris to her distant relatives of her, she was ropeable. So she said to the soldiers, when the church bell rings, that's a sign to go out and to kill all these leaders, because all the Huguenot leaders come into Paris for the wedding. So when the bells rang, the soldiers went out and started to murder these defenceless Huguenots, if you like. And they got carried away, and the rebel mob joined in. And they killed the leaders, then they killed the spouses, the kids, the servants of all these Huguenots, and just went on and on and on. In fact, John Fox in his Book of Martyrs says 100,000 people were slaughtered in the first week. The rivers were just, we see the river there. Down there, I think that's like, can't see it, like a river there, just full of blood. And, it was a horrible time, to live. There was over 1 million Huguenots in France at the time. It went down to just over 1,000. They weren't all executed. Many fled to South Africa and places like that. They don't know how many were killed, which is unbelievable. When the news of the massacre reached the Vatican, remember this is 1572, Luther was 1539, right? And they lost England in the 1530s too. So the Catholic Church was losing their grip on the world. So when the Pope Gregory the 13th, when he heard this news, he was absolutely jubilant. Cannons roared and bells rung. It was a wonderful time. And he commissioned a painting. This painting is still in the Vatican today. It's a painting of it's a long, very long, tall painting. It's a little shot in the middle of it, where the Huguenots were executed. And of course, he struck a medal. And this is the medal. I've got actually a copy of that medal from 1572. Believe it or not, that's a genuine. So pass it around. Don't take it out of plastic, and whoever gets it last, give it back to me. I appreciate it. So this medal was struck. It says on there, it says in Latin, and I can't pronounce that, but in English it says the slaughter of the Huguenots. And it shows an angel with a sword and a cross standing there over a pile of dead bodies. On the other side it's got a picture of Pope Gregory the 13th. And he's proud of the fact that these people were killed, if you like. In his eyes, these people were criminals, were heretics, because they wouldn't bow the knee to the Catholic Church. They chose rather to follow their conscience and obey God according to their conscience. So we're at the saints of the Most High. This power will think to change times and laws. Now I ask you, out of the 10 Commandments, which is the only one that references time?
Sabbath.
What's that?
Sabbath.
The Sabbath, yeah. Twice it mentions that the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. At the end of it says, and God rested on the Sabbath day, wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. This is the only commandment that has time in it. This power, this little horn power, would think to change times and laws. This is a copy, this comes from Catholic.com. This is a copy of the Catholic Ten Commandments. You notice the fourth commandment is not the seventh day, it's actually the third. And they've changed that to remember to keep the Sabbath, remember to keep holy the Lord's day. They've taken out the second commandment. Why are they taking out the second commandment that deals with idols? Because the Catholic Church are just full of idols. In St. Peter's Basilica, there's a large and a large statue of St. Peter. Has anyone seen it? Did you see it when you were there? This large and large statue of St. Peter, out of brass or bronze, and queues go past it and kiss the foot. It's been kissed so many times, it looks like that now. How many kisses does it take to wear away a brass statue? What's that? You didn't kiss it too many times, did you? This comes from, this comes from the Convert's Catechism of Catholic Doctrine. So this is the Catholic Church writing this. It's not me saying it, it's the Catholic Church saying it. Which day is the Sabbath day? Saturday is the Sabbath day. Why do you observe Sunday instead of Saturday? Because the Catholic Church transferred the communion from Saturday to Sunday. They think to change time. Can you change God's law? It can't be changed, written on stone. They only think to change times and laws. This is another letter of the Pope's ruling, if you like. I won't read the whole lot, this is the last part. The Pope has power to change times, to abrogate laws. Abrogate, what's another word for abrogate? Change? Wipe out. Thank you. And to dispense with all things, even the precepts of Christ. Is that blasphemy or what? And because this is the famous quote from John Paul II. He says, a person who violates the sanctity of Sunday is to be punished as a heretic. This is recent. Think to change times and laws. Reign, the 10th identifying mark of this little horn power says, reign for a time, the times of dividing a time. And a time equals a year. I'll put a few texts down there. In Daniel chapter 4:6, what happened in Daniel chapter 4? Nebuchadnezzar was humble, wasn't he? Remember the dream? The tree was cut down, the brass belt put around it. And eventually he says, isn't this great Babylon that I have built? And he was humbled for how many years? How many times? 7 times. So a time equals a year. 1 year equals 360 days in the Jewish calendar. There's 30 days in a month. So 1 year is 360 days. So 3.5 times, if you like, 3.5 years is 1260 days. One prophetic day equals one actual year. And so 1260 days equals 1260 years. So from 538 to 1798, this little horn power was dominant in the world. And I put down here that this 1260 days, if you like, is mentioned 6 times in the Bible, twice in the book of Daniel, and the Daniel 7:25, that's the one we just read, time and half the time. Daniel 12:27 says the same, and 4 times in Revelation, 42 months, which is 1260 days. It mentions the 1260 days in 12:6. Times a half a time, and time is a year. Times is 2 years, half a year is 6 months. Again, 1260 years, and down here 42 months. So in those 6 times, in these different prophecies, we're told that this power would be in control for this period of time to 1798. And it says in, okay, delay of time. In Revelation 3:13, talking about the same beast power, it says, I saw one of his heads that was wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wandered after the beast. In 1798, General Berthier, which was one of the Pope's generals, captured the Pope and took him back to Paris where he died in exile. And it says, all the world, had a deadly wound, was wounded to death. But the deadly wound was healed, and all the world wandered after the beast. Mike and I had the opportunity to go to Italy in 2017. We stayed there. This is the Italian Seventh-day Adventist Union office. They had a little guest room we stayed in for a while. And when we first arrived, we were jet lagged, didn't know what day it was, and we got up and said, let's go for a walk down the Vatican. So we just followed the Tiber River around. You come into the Vatican here, and on the eastern side. And we just so jet lagged out, and I got a backpack full of books to give away, holding a book in my hand. Michael's holding my arm, and we're just wandering here, 8 o'clock on Sunday morning. We're wandering in through this gate here, which is about here. Yeah, we're wandering in here. When we get to about there, we're both praying, Lord, show us someone we can give this book to. Please guide us to give someone this book. Help. And we're walking along, and this monk walks past me on my left side. This is about, he's going flat out. And a voice says, give him the book. So I let go of Michael, I spin around, and I start walking towards this guy, and he spins around, about 6 paces past me. He spins around and walks back. And this is him here. And I said, God told me to give you this book. And he took the book and put it in his pocket. And he said to me, at the same time, God told me to give you this blue bit of paper, which I got in my hand. It's in Italian. I said, what is it? He says, it's a special ticket to see the Pope. My mind went ballistic. I think I'm going to have a one-on-one with the Pope. Do I tell him about the little horn or the first piece of Revelation 13? What do I do with this guy? Do I say, I got a book for you and give him a great controversy? Do I give him the whole backpack? Pick a book and some of your friends. My mind's going ballistic. And he says, look, what you need to do, he says, you need to go up in here and you get into a queue and you go for airport security and you see the Pope. I think, wow, what a blessing. I'm terrified, happy at the same time. And we walk up there and we get in this queue and it's miles long. What it is this. I was naive, that's for sure. This was Easter Sunday. And what that ticket meant was we could get in this first group up here, the closest group to the Pope. That's what it meant. Didn't actually see him. In fact, he hid behind a wall there somewhere. And so we were in this part up here. We went through this airport security. All these people here, these first 2 groups, were in the airport security in this line, full of nuns and priests from all over the world. We're shuffling along, and we didn't know what was happening, but we had an opportunity to give all these books out to all these nuns and stuff. And we finally got in and we found we were sitting here, we sat about here somewhere. They were cardinals, 252 cardinals. They were hundreds and hundreds of people on wheelchairs. And as I sat there, I thought, all the world wandered after the beast. In that congregation, they tell me 100,000 people can fit in that square. I don't know, it was way back here somewhere, but I guess it was packed. And we stayed until the mass started and we left. And all the world wandered after the beast. interesting, when Pope Leo was inaugurated, there was over 150 kings, queens and world leaders attended. Over 150. I put a few names down there that I found. See, the second one from top, Albanese, he went. But what really hit me was this picture here. This picture taken at the day. Does anyone know what that picture is? Or what it's looking at? What it's talking about? What it's actually telling you? I was flabbergasted when I saw this and read what was happening. Over 150 world leaders came, and the Pope insisted on countries that had a Catholic leader, their spouse wore white in the Catholic style. But if there was a Protestant leader, they had to wear black. Isn't that interesting? Absolutely interesting. All the world wondered after the beast. And the third angel followed them and says, this is the third angel's message, and the third angel followed them saying, with a loud voice, what type of voice? A loud voice. If any man worship the beast in his image and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand. Notice it says in. I'd be very interested if your Bible said in. On. What version do you have?
King James.
No, yours is
New King James.
New King James, yeah. Every other translation I can find says on, not in. Only the King James I believe says in. Look, and yet because it says on, a lot of the these are some of the versions. NIV says on, New Living Translation says on, New King James says on. Because it says on, many of these churches today believe you can get some mark here in 666 or something. It's nothing to do with that whatsoever. It says, if any man worship the beast. In the book of Revelation, the word worship or worshipped is mentioned 25 times. It's all about worship, who you worship. It's not as simple as getting a mark there when you're in heaven. That's it, like, oh, I haven't got the mark, I'm right. No, it's who you worship. In fact, it goes on to say this. It says, the same shall drink the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture. That without mixture terrifies me. Ellen White says, in all the dealings of God in history, it's always been mixed with mercy. But God's wrath is going to be poured out without mixture. I do not want to have that wrath. I do not want that mark of the beast. Lord, that's the mark we have to avoid, absolutely. It says there, poured out without mixture, with the his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone, the presence of the holy angels, the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascendeth forever. What goes up there? The smoke. I did a burn up my place this week, all the rubbish, all the trees and stuff. And the smoke went up. It was thick smoke, went up. But when that fire stopped, the smoke was still going up, but it was ashes. The smoke of their torment ascended forever and ever. And they have no rest day and night who what? Who worship the beast in his image. And whosoever receives the mark of his name. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. You know, the highest form of worship is obedience out of love. That's why these remnant living in the last days are commandment keepers, because they have such a love for God that He fills their heart and empowers them day by day to keep His commandments. I don't know about you, but my natural nature is to do the wrong thing. You know, if there's chocolate and broccoli, I always go for the broccoli. You know what I mean? I'm just using it as an example. But our nature is bent that way. But God gives us power to obey Him and to obey Him with love. Now, we are living in the last days. Jesus is coming soon. We need to understand this stuff because we're accountable. We really are. We're going to stand before God and God's going to say, what did you do with this, your time or whatever? Just to finish off with one quote from one of my favourite books, God's Amazing Grace. If you haven't read it, it's so worth reading. It says, we are living in the closing scenes of this earth's history. Is that true?
Yes.
We are living in the dirt and the toenails of Daniel 2. Prophecy is fast fulfilling. That's true. The hours of probation are fast passing. We have no time, not a moment to lose. Let us not be found sleeping on guard. That's just, let no one say in his heart by his works, my Lord delayeth his coming. Let the message of Christ soon return sound forth in earnest words of warning. Now's the time. One day that day of probation is going to close. and it's forever too late to tell us all. I get this burning desire to share with everybody, and we just have to do it because time is short. May God bless each of us. We're all on a journey. May not one be missing, Lord, from this church, our family, and please, Lord, bless us and influence, help us to share boldly our faith with others. May God bless each of us. Last song.